This video is just a quick word on an interview given by Casey Luskin of the Discovery Institute for Fox News. I became aware of the interview through a video by Don Exodus 2, where he deals with the issues in a typically precise and astute manner. However, as my last video touched on the reappraisal of Darwin's Tree of Life, I thought I'd put in my 2 cents on the following comment.
Another example is Darwin's Tree of Life. I mean, that's what I learned back in the day, but there are holes all punched through that as well.
As we learn more and more about the DNA evidence, we're finding that when you take one gene, it gives you one version of the Tree of Life, but when you use a different gene, it gives you an entirely different version of the Tree of Life. An article in the journal New Scientist recently said that the Tree of Life is being, quote, annihilated, unquote, by the new DNA evidence. And yet when we look at textbooks, they present the Tree of Life as if it's an unadulterated fact.
While it is certainly true that Darwin's Tree of Life is no longer the best description of single-cell life forms, it is still the best way of describing the diversification of animal and plant species. Darwin's Tree of Life should, in theory, allow us to track the path of genes back to the point of origin. Having found the origin of those genes, we should then be able to make inferences about which life forms are likely to possess them, even if they're dormant. It's for this reason that atavisms are such strong evidence for evolution. The problem is that some genes have been identified as having travelled horizontally. In the animal kingdom, this is usually done through the agency of a virus. Occasionally it's also the result of hybridization with recently diverged species, for instance between Neanderthals and humans. It is really only the former case that's a problem for the tree model, as it means that individual genes can all of a sudden appear on a completely different branch. So if the tree model is wrong in detail, shouldn't we drop it as Luskin suggests? Well, at this point I'd like to show you this. This is a tree diagram of the Indo-European languages. We know that Latin split to become French, Spanish, Italian and Romanian because we have documentary evidence. But there is a problem with this model. Consider the French word for sheep, mouton. This is actually from the Gaulish word for sheep, which means that it jumped from a Celtic branch to a Latin one. What's more, when the Normans invaded England, they took their words with them, and English sheep got eaten as Norman mutton. While we're talking about English, this language has rifled through the vocabularies of hundreds of languages for spare words. The language tree is almost certainly a faultier model than the Tree of Life, and yet we still use it. English is an identifiably Germanic language, in spite of the presence of words like mutton, imbroglio and tomahawk, because of certain grammatical conventions and a high correlation of the most fundamental words with other Germanic languages. The language tree is a great tool for explaining how languages develop and change. Yes, the tree has many exceptions, but you can't get a good model of what is happening without using the tree. This is a basic teaching method. First you teach the rule, then you teach the exception. There are far more egregious oversimplifications in the science textbooks rather than using the Tree of Life to explain evolution without mentioning exceptions. Anybody who was taught that Galileo dropped weights from the Leaning Tower of Pisa will know at least one of them. Casey Luskin's attack on the teaching of evolution here is entirely disingenuous, and anyone with knowledge on this area will be aware of this. Fortunately, this interview occurred on Fox News, and as they are fair and balanced, they will no doubt have given somebody who understands evolution equal time to explain this. I'm equally sure that the interview technique will have been just as friendly as the fawning approach taken here.